All Quiet on the Western Front was first published in 1929 and received mass acclaim because it's such a good book. However, it was banned in several countries due to its realistic depiction of life in World War I. And of course, the Nazis also banned it for many other different reasons. Anyway, the book tells the story of Paul, a young German student whose entire class enthusiastically enlists after the start of the Great War. But World War I takes its toll on everyone, and Paul feels like he's a foreigner in his own land when he goes back home on leave, as the town and the people haven't changed at all, but he has. Paul is very happy to return to the front lines with his comrades and volunteers to go on patrol where he kills a French soldier and has to watch him die. Paul begs the corpse for forgiveness in agony and loses the will to live after Kat, a veteran of the trenches and Paul's best friend, is killed. In the final chapter of the book, he comments that peace is coming soon, but he does not see the future as bright and shining with hope. Paul feels that he has no aims left in life and that their generation will be different and misunderstood. And then he is killed in October of 1918 on an oddly peaceful day, reading All Quiet on the Western Front. The 1930 film adaptation to the book is pretty accurate and true to the story. Audiences saw the grim realities of World War I as best as the studio could make in 1930. Many of the extras in the film were also World War I veterans themselves, and the film reflected the book and the interwar world's view on World War I. Additionally, like the book, the movie was also banned in several countries for being just too accurate. As a side note, there was also a 1937 sequel to the movie titled The Road Back, and it depicts the men returning back to post-World War I Germany. Meanwhile, the 1979 TV version of All Quiet on the Western Front starts to see some more noticeable deviations from the book and the 1930 version. To start, this version is obviously in color and includes other moments that were not mentioned before, such as Himmelstoss being awarded the Iron Cross by the Kaiser, and the inclusion of the Kaiser actually felt very out of place and felt more like a comment on giving awards and accolades to people who did not earn them, such as Himmelstoss, who was a coward in both versions of All Quiet on the Western Front. Also, unlike the 1930 version, the 1979 movie shows a gas attack taking place, but due to restrictions in age ratings and technical abilities, the soldier affected by the gas is only shown coughing ferociously, and Kat tries to kill him to be merciful and prevent more suffering. But stretchers arrive and take the soldier away, who is still coughing uncontrollably, and it's a gritty and brutal scene, but also a solid adaptation of the book to the screen. The 2022 version of All Quiet on the Western Front, however, has the most changes and deviations that are quite drastic and actually hinder the film's historical realism as well as the story which is being told, which the other two versions had mostly tried to stay true to. From the start, the whole movie shows the Germans collecting uniforms off of the dead to be given to new recruits, which actually never happened. Next, the movie takes place in 1917 instead of 1914, which is a massive change. First of all, Germany had been under a British blockade during the war and the population was starving by 1917, which is not at all shown. Second, Paul is 17 years old in this version and lies about his age to get into the army, which mainly only happened in 1914, and by 1917, although people were still optimistic, they kinda knew the war was a bit more brutal, but didn't really know the full reality. Most of the plot is also completely changed with only a few aspects remaining the same, such as Paul killing the French soldier and begging the body for forgiveness, as well as Kat being killed shortly before the war ends, but each are under very different circumstances than from the book and the other movie versions. How Kat dies and key elements of other installments are completely removed, such as all of Paul's classmates being killed, and when Paul dies is changed to be right after the November 11th armistice in some desperate final push for some reason. But the 22 version is also able to show a lot of the Great War in its true self than other versions were previously able to do, as shown in some of the battle scenes with flamethrowers and the inclusion of Char Saint-Chamond tanks. The movie also focused a lot more on the differences in quality of life between the generals and the enlisted men in the trenches, but there are also practically no junior officers in the movie, which is odd with the direction that they went with. The 2022 version also contrasts the general eating well compared to one scene where German soldiers stop in the middle of a battle to eat food from a French trench, which I'm not quite sure how accurate that is. But this brings me to my biggest criticism of the 2022 version, compared to other iterations of All Quiet on the Western Front, and that is the book itself. And that is the entire point of the book. The 2022 film is missing the whole point of being an All Quiet on the Western Front film. Sure, recurring themes occur that are universal to World War I movies like the horrors of the trenches, life on the Western Front, but that is not the main point. The main point is that Paul is supposed to return home on leave and see how different all the old men perceive the war compared to how it actually was. and in my opinion the 2022 movie failed spectacularly on that front, especially when it taking place in 1917 and 1918 instead of over the course of the entire war. The 2022 adaptation could simply have just been another World War I movie, as it takes very little inspiration from the book or even other iterations of the film for that matter, and only used the title and character names as the characters are completely different as is the story. It's still a decent movie, don't get me wrong, but it's just not an All Quiet on the Western Front movie. They should have just called it Mud and Blood or something like that. But for real, how come nobody has made a Storm of Steel movie yet? That book was flipping awesome, and the script is right there for you. Come on, Hollywood, make it happen. With that, my personal favorite is still the 1930 version, followed by the 1979 version, and lastly, the 2022 adaptation is last in my view, as the effects and the set are completely fantastic, but the story just isn't an All Quiet on the Western Front movie. But what is your favorite adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.